It's top of the hour. You're watching CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. I want to bring in now CNN's Dana Bash, Democratic strategist Jonathan Tassini, CNN political commentators Margaret Hoover and Scott Jennings, and also CNN contributor Jason Kander. So here we are, the moment of reckoning. What do you know about how this is going down, or going to go down, Dana?
Well, our Ted Barrett, who's our stealth Senate producer, says that what the expectation is first there will be a vote that the Democrats will get, which is going to be to send all of this back to the committees, which is not going to pass because it's a Democratic measure and it will probably be party line. And that is obviously just to make a point. The point being, from their perspective, that this was not doing right.
There's John McCain
yes.
on his cell phone. This is live outside of his office, and he has been he's critical when it comes to this.
Right. So actually, let me move on to why John McCain is important on this particular. Just wanted to see if he was going to say anything on this particular measure, and the answer is because, you know, we've been reporting for hours now, the question has been whether or not Republicans like John McCain, Lindsey Graham, others who do not like this skinny bill at all. They say it's bad policy. It would be bad if it became the law, that they absolutely do not want it to become the law. So what they have been looking for is an assurance from the House Speaker that this would go to what's known as a conference, so that the House and Senate would come together, find a compromise that is not this, and then ultimately, if they could do that, send that to the president. The initial statement that the House Speaker put out was not sufficient for a lot of these guys. So because of that, Lindsey Graham, John McCain, and a few others, I think it was 5 senators, got on a conference call on speakerphone with the House Speaker earlier tonight, and they felt better about it. So Senator Graham, for example, I spoke to him this evening. He says he's in. He's going to vote for this, even though he thinks it's terrible policy, because he has an assurance that this will not be the law of the land, that the House will bring it to conference, that the House Speaker will bring it to conference. John McCain has not yet said. He's a holdout. And, you know, at this point, every single vote counts. It is a real nail-biter to see how he will go, and not just him, other Republicans as well who have been on the fence about this.
You missed a call. I think you probably want to get back to that.
I know, I saw
that.
So did I. I was going to say something.
Back to that person, so go ahead.
I looked at it. My eyebrows went up. We won't say.
What do you make of what Dan said and what you heard from Ryan Nobles, and you saw Senator John McCain get on the elevator, didn't say anything?
Yeah, I think Republicans, from what I can tell, feel like they have a really strong chance to pass this tonight. But we have to remember, procedurally, nothing happens in the morning. If this passes tonight, tomorrow morning, Obamacare is still the law, because this has to go to a conference. And this is sort of just moving the process along. What goes into the conference will be these 2 bills that are different, and what comes out could be much different than what we're seeing out of either chamber individually. So there's a lot of focus on the CBO tonight. I think that's to some degree irrelevant, because this isn't going to be the final law. And so for people who are focused on that, I would almost throw that out, because the conference committee is going to come up with things that have different details and different provisions.
But still, again, it is one more step in the process of either repealing, major health care in this country, and replacing it, or not, right? And so. And again, this vote could happen at any moment. We're live now. Again, we just saw John McCain go in. But you said it's not. This won't be the law of the land now, but certainly they lose control of it once it leaves the Senate. Who knows?
No, because there's senators in the conference committee, so they still have their people in the room.
Well, but
they have
his
to
point is that they have to actually go to
the
conference and not.
Yeah, so it's not all the Senate. It's the Senate and the House.
Have this go straight to the House. Although, given the way that the House of Representatives works these days, even if the House Speaker wanted to just send this through the House, I think getting the votes for that would be pretty difficult. Even though he gave the assurances to the senators, he wouldn't try.
The concern was that basically they would take the skinny repeal and just send it to the White House, and that there would be no actual conference committee, which they can do. And anybody who trusts Paul Ryan to do what he claims he's going to do I've got some swampland in the Florida Everglades to sell them.
Just remember, though, there's a lot of people who have very short-term memory in terms of how botched and manic the process was when the Affordable Care Act was passed. If you guys remember, I mean, I know you all remember, but let us also just remember that when Nancy Pelosi passed the bill through the House of Representatives, remember she said the 2,000 pages that people had less than 24 hours, 72 hours to read, we have to pass it in order for you to figure out what's in the bill, right?
But Margaret,
this is what happened. Not justifying it. Well, no, hold on. There was I understand there are a lot of differences, and I'm not justifying this process.
No, but a major difference was there were many hearings. It was very fleshed out. Here you had a process where a bill that nobody had read, when there were no hearings, 0 hearings by the Republican leadership. We're all we've watched all this congressional process. Usually what happens is somebody offers a bill and they says, okay, let's dispense with the reading. They had to read the entire bill when it was introduced about 2 hours ago because there was no physical copies in the hands of everybody.
Yeah, at least
That's
it was
an
in 2,000 pages, and at least they can read it.
But,
okay, and then it is a slimmed down version, and what it is it's reforming specific elements that we're all talking about now. It's about the individual mandate. We're talking about Medicare expansion. We're talking the things that we're talking about, the components we're talking about are components that we've all been talking about. There's nothing that we can tell right now is new.
I want to get Jason. Jason, we don't want to forget about you. Jason, what say you? Because I hear you're trying to get in there.
Well, look, they've had 7 years to work on this, and what this all comes down to is a couple of things. One, they have no idea what they want to do. They don't have a better idea than what exists right now. President Obama, when he left office, said there are some things that you can do to make Obamacare better, but they're not interested in doing that. They're interested, I guess, in political vengeance, taking it out instead on the American people. What is really happening here, and what I think is so sick about this, is these folks know exactly what they're doing is wrong. You know that feeling you had maybe when you were in middle school or high school and you were about to make a decision that you knew your parents were going to be mad at you, and you were like, I'm going to make it really fast before I change my mind? That's what's happening here. They know what they're doing is wrong, but it doesn't affect them. It affects all of us. And I think it's really disappointing.
Do we have Karine Jean-Pierre? Is Karine there?
Yes.
Go ahead, Karine, sorry.
Yeah. Hey, Don.
Hi, how are you? We don't want to forget about you as well.
I'm doing
very passionate table. Again,
okay.
I just want to remind everyone we're waiting for this vote to happen on the Senate floor. It's going to happen at any moment on this skinny repeal of Obamacare. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, Don, as somebody who was in the White House in the Obama administration the first 2 years and was around for the Affordable Care Act, it is not the same. What the Republicans are doing is completely abnormal, unusual. We had hearings, we had town halls. There were well over 100 amendments that were presented by the Republicans that were put into ACA. So this is not the same. You cannot compare it at all. And I remember President Obama reaching out to Republicans, wanting to make this a bipartisan effort when he talked about health care, and they refused. They absolutely refused. And what we're seeing now is this bill is being introduced in the dead of night without Republicans themselves knowing what's going on and what's happening. And you have Republicans running away from it. All day long we've been hearing Republicans saying, oh, it has to go into conference, or they don't want this bill because they don't want this bill to go into law. Yeah. So this is what's happening now. And we're talking about people's lives. People will die if we repeal
and Scott and Margaret are taking issue with that.
Well, look, here's the thing. There are two choices. You can move this process along, get it to a conference committee, and try to make something better out of it, which is what most Republicans want to do. Or we can stop the process tonight and kill the Republican dream, the 7-year dream of repealing and replacing Obamacare. That is not an option for grassroots conservatives.
No, but that's not. Oh, well, that may be true for grassroots conservatives who actually don't care about actually people having health care coverage.
Nobody likes this
I think
bill.
what people want to do actually is what they've said is the third option, which is return to regular order. And every single Democrat that stood on the Senate floor today said, let's go back to the committees, let's have hearings, let's work in a bipartisan way to try to fix the Affordable Care Act. Every single Democrat, including myself, has said the Affordable Care Act is not perfect. It needs to be improved. But the way you improve it is not by throwing 16 million people off. It's not by raising premiums another 20%. It's by going back and actually having hearings and trying to figure it out.
That's the skinny part. I mean,
that's the skinny. Yeah, the full one would be much more. That's right.
But again, everyone made this point. No one likes this bill, and not even the people who are passing it like the bill because they're saying they don't want it to become law.
No one.
much issue.
because it's process.
No one doubts that there
popular.
will be people will be thrown off in some Republican version. Millions of people will lose health care. And that is incredibly, it's sad that this is the way you want to treat health care. It needs to be fixed.
First of all, I take so much issue with the notion that, yes, Republicans aren't agreeing on this, but this, and I agree, Republicans should have consolidated around a central unified vision after 7 years when they finally got the ball. But the idea that they didn't know what to do is simply false. The problem is that there are different factions, very strong factions within the sort of center right or from the right side of the aisle that have very different ideas of what to do, and they can't agree on what that is. But the basic premises of what a Republican or a center-right market-based healthcare reform would do are there. The principles are there. The idea is expanding coverage, lowering premiums, frankly, improving health outcomes for poor Americans, reforming the Medicaid process, because all of the expansion of Obamacare has been through Medicaid.
How does all of this happen? And because here we are, no matter how many people like it, how many people don't like it, is it going to pass? Is it not going to pass? We've heard Tammy Duckworth, Democrat from Illinois, saying she believes they do have the vote. She's not happy about it. So as this process moves along, Dana, and we're live, we're going to watch the vote happen at any moment now. Take us through this. How is this going to happen again?
Okay, so assuming that it's not, full stop gone, if this fails tonight, like Scott was saying, then that is the end of the dream that Republicans have had to repeal Obamacare, at least for the time being. Assuming that does not happen and it does pass, then there's going to be even more toing and froing and a lot of hard work that is going to be going on inside this conference, assuming that the conference does happen, between key members of the Republican Party in the House, key members of the Republican Party in the Senate, and good luck finding a solution and finding compromise among those two factions in a way that they almost didn't do in the House and they definitely didn't do in the Senate, because this is a shell. This is a shell to keep the process going, what they're doing in the Senate. So the answer to your question is, just because this is going now doesn't mean that they're going to be able to figure it out. There are alternate ideas. There are, like Margaret was talking about, there are people like Lindsey Graham and Bill Cassidy from Louisiana and others who are thinking about a completely different approach. Not to use the kind of platform of Obamacare and try to fix from their perspective around the edges, but give a much more Republican philosophical approach, like block granting to the states. That's a big thing that they're working on, trying to get the governors involved. Who knows if that's going to happen? But it might be something like that, a game changer that is going to be the only way to get these two sides to figure out a way to compromise.
So even with this, and I think Scott said this, it's not a done deal.
Totally not. Not even close.
Not even close.
They're just trying to keep
the process
forgive me, the patient
alive.
Yes.
Alive.
So I want to make 2 points, and the second one will be based on what Margaret said about being market-based. The first point, and I don't want this, I think this gets ignored or not talked about on TV. I think, and I want to say it to the TV, that all the credit to this and the reason we're here potentially about defeating this bill that will put millions of people off health insurance is the credit to the millions of people, the hundreds of thousands of activists who are out in the streets, who got arrested, who made phone calls, who wrote letters, who went to town halls. And it's to you, you're the ones that are the heroes of this fight. Not necessarily the senators of the Democratic Party, frankly, but the people, the activists who hit the streets. And that's why we're at this point. But what Margaret said on the market-based issue is really, really important. That's the problem. We cannot solve healthcare in this country by thinking that this can be based on a market solution. We need to move, and this is something that many of us have been passionate about for the last 20 years, to a universal healthcare system, to a single-payer Medicare for all system, like every other normal country in the world. And I don't even want to go, let's not talk about Europe. Look at Australia, which is run by a center-right government. They have a single-payer system, and their healthcare costs, the amount of money they spend on their healthcare GDP is half of what the United States spent. Yeah. What we have to go in terms of solutions, and this is the encouraging thing to me, Don, it may not happen next year, but the support for single payer, for universal health care has never been more intense and
As you said,
and
at this
big.
point, that's not happening at this point.
But that's the
I need to talk about what's happening.
Bernie Sanders lost the election.
It's not about
Bernie
just Bernie
Sanders is not
Sanders.
here.
Jonathan, I need to talk about what's happening now. And I
know,
want to get to Jason Kander. Jason, I heard you groaning when you heard Dana talk about.
I didn't mean to.
It wasn't, I'm sorry, it wasn't the best metaphor.
But I don't know if it was about the
it's
metaphor
okay.
or just
I'm
about
sorry.
keeping the process going.
It just felt real to me. I apologize.
So, what do you take issue with?
Oh, I didn't. Look, I don't take issue with anything other than the fact that I just think that unfortunately, like, look, when Dana said that, she was thinking, like, at the time, she was thinking, that's a little too close to home, which she's right to think. The problem is there's a lot of Republican senators right now who don't seem to understand that this is real, that this is going to affect real people's lives. And what bothers me so much, well, so many things bother me about this, but for years, when they knew that there was adult supervision, President Obama in the Oval Office, they would pass over and over again a repeal, knowing that it would never happen. And now that, in many ways, there is no adult supervision at the end of that ride, now they're having cold feet. And the thing about that is, instead of saying, oh, I shouldn't be having cold feet, they should look themselves in the mirror and realize that that's a human emotion that they're having, and they're having cold feet because this is a terrible idea, and they know it, and they should trust that instinct.
But I'm not so sure if it's cold feet or it's just that they don't know how to actually move their feet to get to the point where, and to the place where they have.
I'd like to believe it's humanity.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm just talking about just in the pure policy of it. I think Stephen Moore is with us.
Yeah, but hang on. Karine has an and we'll get Stephen in. Stephen has been on a lot.
Yes.
Karine, what did you want to say quickly?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the other thing too is this bill is just unpopular. Where the Republicans' House bill was unpopular, the Senate House bill, the Senate health bill was unpopular. I mean, their constituents don't want this bill, and the reason why is because it's not a health care bill. When you're taking people's health care away, whether it's 16 million people or 32 million people, it's not a health care bill. And let's not forget that today there were 10 governors who came out bipartisan and said they did not want the skinny repeal. And it's one of those things where Heller and Portman, they need to listen. They need to listen to their governors. Yeah. It's just completely insane what's happening right now.
Hold on, Stephen Moore, are you still there?
Can you see me, Don?
Yeah, I can see. Can you see me now? Can you see me? Dana Bash is here, and Dana has some questions.
Well, I just have a question, just because you know this better than anybody on the policy of where the Republicans actually can go to come together. Is there an answer? I mean, let's just say they get to conference.
Yeah.
How are they going to get themselves out of that in a way that they barely did in the House and they didn't in the Senate? What do you think?
Well, Dana, you did a great job of explaining where we are in this process. Let's assume for a moment that this bill passes, the skinny bill. Then we do go to this conference. By the way, you're right, Dana. There's no way that the skinny bill would ever pass the House. So it's irrelevant, even if they brought it up for a vote. There are at least 50 conservatives in the House who would vote against it. So you are going to see a conference. And the big question, Dana, is can the Republicans come up with something that gets 50 votes in the Senate? Because, look, they have to.
Or 218 in the House. I think that might even be a harder thing.
I think they have to for two reasons. I mean, one is I just think politically, failure is not an option here. They have to deliver, or else they're going to get decimated in the elections in 2018.
Totally agree.
But they will get crushed.
But problem is,
what is the answer?
They might lose if they pass something, but I guarantee you, if they don't pass something, they will lose. But I want to go back to this point the gentleman just made. Finally, we have an honest liberal who is saying, really what we want is we want a single-payer government-run system.
Yeah, you know why?
No, really.
But
I mean, truly.
But you know why, Stephen? Because it's the only economic sane thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's worked so well. I mean, look how well it's worked at the Veterans Administration, right? Exactly. I mean, we have a government-run system there, and people are dying in the hospitals. I mean, is that what we want for our health care system? Everybody's going to be covered, but they're going to get lousy care.
Well, if I can I respond?
Yeah, sure.
The reason I argue for that is it's the only economically sane thing to do.
Right.
And it's not just me saying this. It's Warren Buffett saying it.
Oh my God.
It's the Harvard Business Review saying it.
You got to quote all the capitalists.
Well,
many-
why do people, can I ask you a question?
Let-
Why do people,
Steve,
when they get
Steve.
sick in Canada, come to the United States for care?
That's a lot of, I can't use the word, that's a
They
lot of
do.
BS. No,
No,
come
it's
on.
not. They
I
do.
tell you what, Steve.
I know
I've
dozens of people. I don't even know that many Canadians.
I've talked to many Canadians,
Yeah, right.
and
They love
every
it.
single Canadian, if they say, look, our system's not perfect, but if you say, would you like the U.S. system? Would you like to pay the premiums and the copays? Not a single Canadian does it. And I lived in Australia.
They like the Canadian. They like the
Stop,
Canadian
stop,
system
everyone.
until they get sick.
Nothing
It's only
about
when they
what we're
get sick
talking
they don't
about here
like
is
it.
going to make one bit of darn difference
All right,
as to
let's
what's
go back.
happening
All right,
on the
wanna go
Senate
back to the-
floor.
Way back to
So
2016,
if you guys want
you
to,
can start all over again.
this was argued
But
during
Don,
process.
there's an
It's a
important point
process.
here.
Yeah, this was argued during the election, and it didn't
Don,
obviously.
I would
Bernie
just.
Sanders did not get the nomination.
This is
Hillary
not
Clinton
about.
did,
All right,
and she
I'm just going to
lost
say
Donald
15
Trump.
seconds, and I'll stop with that for now. 15 seconds. It has advanced single payer, and the support for it among the people has advanced dramatically faster than I've seen in the last 20 years. And I'm just telling you that it is going to come because we will have no choice.
Okay, go ahead, Jason.
I was just going to say the point here is that at least, you know, Stephen was saying an honest liberal. Yeah, what we're saying is, here's what we would do. and you've got the Republicans in control of everything right now, and they're saying, let's go to conference so we can figure out what to do.
You did say that last year, and you're not in the Senate voting on this tonight. That's the point.
Exactly.
That is the point. This was litigated in the election. If Obamacare, if people really wanted it, they would have never given Republicans control of the government. And
it's
yet
great.
they did.
1/3 of the
And
American healthcare
17%
system.
of them think this is a good idea.
You know what?
Well.
You know what? If all of us voted on the polls, the flash polls, and at any given moment, nothing would get done. I mean, Democrats absolutely swallowed the pill, and they had the courage of their convictions in 2010
Stand by.
and 2011, and Republicans need to have the courage of their convictions tonight.
Yeah, and listen, we're going to go back to Capitol Hill. Let's go back to Capitol Hill now. I just want to show you, give you a live shot there. They're about to vote on this skinny repeal of Obamacare, and as soon as that happens, we'll bring it to you live. You're not going to miss any of it. Also, we have a correspondent camped out there. We also saw John McCain just moments ago, as I understand. He is on the Senate floor, and I think he had a little chat with Chuck Schumer. Not sure what that means. He could be the deciding vote here. We'll be back right after a very quick break. Don't go anywhere.